Well, good evening, folks. Hope you're having a bloody good Friday. Has it been a good one for you? It's been not too bad around here, although all I have done is read, and answer phone calls all day. What a day it seems to have been. We'll get into more of that very shortly. Hello to a few folks who are poking their heads in tonight. Sandra first in tonight, about half an hour early. Good on you, Sandra. Hello, Aussie Sue. Chris, how are you, bud? Hope things going well with your part of the world. Toxic Q, Sunflowers back in the house. Hope you're having a lovely time too. G'day, Cam. Hope you and Tammy are getting ready for a big weekend. And for folks in the Nambour area, there will be another My Place meeting coming up in the not too distant future. I want to say it's going to be a midweek thing. So Cam will tell me more details about that probably as I keep my phone beside me. I might try and put it on to silent so it doesn't get too mad. Narelle, hello. Thanks for coming in. Kate, who have I missed here? Sandra's being very talkative. Chris, how are you, mate? Daniel, hi, Katie. The Galactic Larrikins are in the house. I was actually speaking to Bradford today. Anybody who is looking to move to Canberra, he knows a really good place that's for sale and a really good price. So if you are looking to move to Canberra, I don't know what you'd want to do, street sweeping, something maybe? No, beautiful town, really nice roads. Well, they used to be really nice roads. Now they're filled with idiots and kangaroos, but that's a whole other story. Speaking of idiots and kangaroos, well, it has been a bit of a day, has it not? So woke up to news this morning, as most of you will be aware, that Guru had a court appearance yesterday that he was meant to make. Now, we were talking last week, I think it was, where he pointed out the problem that he had. The problem that he had was that last time he went to court, he had a bit of a win, but this is the result of a win. So, I don't know, the win is what you make of it, I guess. He did fight a battle with the magistrate, I think, that he was in front of at that time to get his bail conditions, if not completely removed, then certainly some of them removed, and was successful in doing that. But he also played a hand, I think, where he got into some sort of discussion with the judge or the magistrate, and the offer was made, well, then, would you like to go and hear that in the Downing Centre Court or something like that, or the Downing Street Court? That's eventually what they decided to do. So they booked him into the Sydney Court, Downing Street, for a hearing yesterday. But they also booked him into the Wollongong Magistrates Court for a hearing yesterday as well. He couldn't be in two places at the same time, separated by 100 kilometres or more. So what was he meant to do? So he's turned up at one and was unable to turn up at the other. Of course, the one he didn't turn up to is the one that issued the summons or the arrest warrant for him. So who knows? They're going to make life a bit tough. I've been trying to find out in the last little while whether or not he is out or not. The plan was he left a message this morning that basically said, I'm going in, going to try and get this thing sorted today, hopefully a video link into the Downing Centre Court and get this all straightened out. But they will probably be pricks about it and keep him in for the long weekend. So I'm not sure if he's out yet. I haven't received any notification of it. I've just had a bit of a look on some of his sites and can't see any indications of it there yet either. So Guru could be spending the night behind bars and could be spending a couple of nights behind bars until they decide to administer him one day next week. There was also some other interesting news. I haven't been able to confirm this, nor have I been able to get a denial about it either. But this news came out this morning too. Dave Oneggs will be sentenced over his Lismore flood relief on the 12th of June. So that's Monday. Now, it appears that he's changed his plea from not guilty to unlawful fundraising. Now, I don't know if there is truth to that or not. I have not been able to confirm it, but that's certainly what was being pushed around this morning. And others are talking about it like it is for real. So if that is the case, well, can't say we didn't warn you about that. So that's, I guess, a step in the right direction. Speaking of steps in the right direction, I got an email today from Stephen in Tasmania who had this to say: just received his surprise money, a deposit from the ANZ, or so I beg your pardon, from the NAB bank into his account. It was only $10, but he thinks it's a test run. The transaction details said 706 NAB fuel cashback offer Australia. So I happen to have an NAB account. I will go in and have a look and see whether or not the NAB have given me $10. I doubt it. It'll show its head up pretty easily because there's no other money in the account. So if they put $10 in, woo, we'll be away. There have been some very interesting associations made over the last little while as we've been speaking about the jibbity jab and everything that's gone on from that. Now, a lot of people have poo-pooed the idea that Bill Gates is involved. An interesting graphic has been out for a little while. I thought we might just revisit it just to show what sort of fingers Bill Gates has into the corporate world. Have a bit of a look at this. This is the amount of money that he has spent. This was leading up to end of 2022, I believe. So have a look at the institutions that he is availing himself of, or the money that he is spending. Sorry, I just need to try and find something here, and I can't find it. Yeah, so have a look at where he is spending his money. $53 million he sent to the BBC, but that's millions. The Gavi, Gavi, $3 billion to them. The World Health Organization, $4.3 billion plus he's handed over to the World Health Organization. The NIH in America, $18 million. And how much of that, I wonder, has gone directly into Fauci's pocket? Microsoft and Gavi have been involved in the whole ID 2020 software development program. That's worthwhile looking into if you don't know much about that. Over $155 million to the CDC. That's the Center for Disease Control in America. They're the people Americans are meant to be able to trust, and the greater world are meant to be able to trust when it comes to figuring out whether or not there is a bug that's going to kill us. Of course, they don't really care whether or not the bug's going to kill us. They just care how much they're going to be paid to tell the story you want them to tell. Bit like the media, $53 million there, $40 million to Professor Chris Whitty, who was England's chief medical officer at the time. I don't know that he's still that. He's probably gone off to go and spend his $40 million or more. Vaccine research development at Oxford University received $243 million plus. Now, from my recollection, Oxford weren't instrumental in discovering any kind of a cure, but it does say research, doesn't it? So were they being paid to not tell their truthful research on this process, being told to give the results, I guess, that they had been paid to deliver? That's certainly the feeling that many people have about our learning institutions who have received money from the likes of Bill Gates and others, including, share down money that comes through the likes of the CDC, the NIH, the TGA, the Australian government branches of the health department, and so on. Oh, speaking of which, Brett Sutton has quit as the health minister or the chief health officer in Victoria, supposedly for a job with the CSIRO. But there is a class action that starts next week in Victoria that is suing, and as part of that, suing Brett Sutton directly for bad advice onto the government, and suing the government for a great deal of the malfeasance that they put into Victorians during the 7 lockdowns, I think they went through from memory now. So, yeah, so a lot of that money obviously from Bill Gates, but there is a lot more money that has gone from governments into the places like the WEF, into the WHO, into media organizations to push the narrative. And of course, if you're not aware, you haven't been watching this show enough, the Australian media, mainstream media, are 100% complicit in this. These bastards haven't let us have our say on mainstream media. They've shouted us down. They've called us conspiracy theorists. They've called us nutbags. They've called for us to be locked away, to be exempted from civilization. Live in your house and never come out. And we know that the media were bribed with a brilliant little incentive from the Australian government, a 100% 12-month tax rebate. That means every ounce of tax they take or pay doesn't have to get paid. Nice, huh? So I don't know if you had a business and it nearly went to the wall during COVID. The media will tell you that their businesses nearly went to the wall, but the government propped their businesses up. The media owners managed to pick up a bit over $31 million for the loss of revenue they had during the COVID period. A bit disappointing, I guess, for other businesses who didn't get that kind of injection of funds. It would have been pretty useful, I imagine. Now, of course, there are a lot more issues confronting the government and employers, particularly, and this Sutton case in Victoria that will be instrumental, and it's a class action, a lot of people involved with it. It will be instrumental, I think, in laying out damages going forward, particularly to Victorians. Although we must always remember that in Victoria, the judiciary is owned by Chairman Dan and his illegal cohort. Speaking of illegal cohort and Dan, do you know Chairman Dan down in Victoria, I think it was yesterday or the day before, gave a closed-door speech to a Chinese delegation. He refused to release details of his speech to the Australian media, and no Australian media were allowed access to the speech at the time. So we don't know what he's promised them behind closed doors, and he refuses to share any of that information with the media. Victoria, how on earth did this bloke get elected back in? Oh, that's right. He didn't get elected. He was selected back in, wasn't he? Yeah. Well, I might get chased down for that one, do you think? Maybe there's a few other things we should be checking out as well. This is a pretty interesting one. If you can read, I don't know what the algorithm's going to do there, but I'm not going to talk about it. I will talk about this one though. A lot of people have queried whether or not, when I originally spoke about the Khazarian mafia a couple of years ago now, probably, they've doubted that any place actually existed. Well, I'm very sad to say that it definitely did exist. It definitely still does exist. This is what the map of the area looked like in the early 10th century. Now, the Russians did go pretty strongly not too long after this map, I think, was made. And they took over a lot more land, including Khazaria. However, never doubt that Khazaria was a place. And that is where there were two branches of the Jewish sects, if you like, went their separate ways, the Ashkenazis and the Khazarians. And the Khazarians went north, the Ashkenazis went east, and eventually spread out from there. I am in no way suggesting anything bad about the Jewish faith or the Jewish people in general, but I will tell you, just like any other faith, there are not good people in it. Not all of them, but some of them are definitely not good people. And I guess there is a bit of reticence in me to pick this fight, because I do not want to get tarred with, as soon as you bring this conversation up, you'll get tarred with, the whole anti-Semitic brush. And that's a battle that I am prepared to fight, but I'm going to fight it at my time and my choosing, simply because we're going to have a lot more evidence that will be irrefutable for you to believe. And I believe some of that in part will come from Mel Gibson. We're about to see Mel Gibson vilified again in mainstream media. They will be re-releasing his anti-Semitic drunken rant, or was it drunken or not, I don't know, but his anti-Semitic rant, I think, to a police officer some years ago, which I don't condone in any way, shape or form. There is a few other bits and pieces they'll drag up: his bad temper, he's done this to that person, he's shouted at this woman. But at the end of the day, we are going to be beholden to Mel Gibson, I believe. He and Tim Ballard have got together to produce what will be a 4-part docuseries on child trafficking in Australia, around the world, rather. This happened when Mel Gibson got in contact with Ballard, asking whether or not he and his organisation would be able to get 20 Ukrainian orphans that Mel Gibson looks after, sends money for, was able to get those 20 Ukrainian children out of the danger zones that they were living in the orphanages or whatever accommodations they had. So Ballard took the opportunity to say, listen, this could really be great for the movement all over. I'm not going to ask you for a donation, but we should film this. We could turn this into a documentary that would really make it obvious to the world what's going on. And Mel Gibson readily agreed. Now, that was meant to be the story of saving 20 kids out of Ukraine. When they got to Ukraine, Ballard handed over a list of the 20 names to the Ukrainian authorities, looking for them in the orphanages where they said they were going to be. And the Ukrainians countered that by handing him a list of 10,000 children's names and saying, we don't know where any of them are. 10,000 of their own kids missing. No idea where they are, can't help you find the ones you're looking for. So the story really starts, I think, from there, from what I've been able to ascertain. I haven't seen anything other than a very short clip, which indicates an element of danger, a lot of water, assault, big sea crossing somewhere on what looks like a pretty rickety boat, a lot of guns being waved around. No sign of Mel Gibson in that clip, I'll point out, but it is only very, very, very short. But this docu-series has gone from Ukraine and reached out all around the world while they've been trying to find these 20 kids. And the whisper is that it will be released in the coming days, like days rather than weeks. We're all encouraged to watch it, as painful as it may be, but it will reveal the absolute truth of what's going on. And I'm really pleased that Mel Gibson's got behind it, because I think Mel's been vilified for many years. I had the opportunity to meet him many years ago. And okay, he was on a publicity junket, but he's always been one of those kind of blokes who says he doesn't like doing publicity and all that kind of thing. I found him to be really nice, very funny, really, really a very, very interesting guy, and a genuine lover of humanity. Loves kids. We were at an event where there were some children, and he was just a father to them. That's about the best way to describe it. So I'm just having a bit of a glance now through some of your chats. Appy saying some interesting. YouTube have expanded their emoji mental awareness pride flower rainbow heart. All right, I've read enough. G'day, Pete. Nice to see you're in the race too. Okay, doesn't look like we've got too many questions there. We shall move on. I've got a few other things that I'd like to show you. This is an interesting little one that I saw yesterday. Leukemia is the most common type of cancer in children. According to the International Agency for Research on Cancer, formaldehyde is known to cause leukemia and other cancers. And according to the vaccine manufacturers, the FDA and the CDC, formaldehyde is an ingredient in vaccines. Formaldehyde is obviously listed as a poison as well. These things, I think, we have been aware of. We just have had a certain amount of cognitive dissonance about the whole thing. We either haven't wanted to admit that formaldehyde is in a vaccine, which you are introducing in some cases to your child at hours old. Why would you do something like that? Some interesting studies have been put out recently, a lot surrounding what would happen if you kept a mask on for a long time, and the results of the effects, psychological effects of wearing masks and potential other health consequences. So there is a significant psychological effects list there. Hypoxemia, hypocapnia, shortness of breath, increased lactate concentration. Well, that could be good for some of our trainees. Decline in pH levels, acidosis, toxicity, inflammation, self-contamination. I don't know quite how that works. Increased in stress hormone levels, adrenaline, noradrenaline, adrenaline, and cortisol. Increased muscle tension, immunosuppression, activation of flight or fright stress response, chronic stress conditions, fear, mood disturbances, insomnia, fatigue, compromised cognitive performance. How many people do you know who've been jabbed suffer from one or more of those particular predicaments before we get into the health consequences, like increased predisposition for viral and infection illness, headaches, anxiety, depression, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, exacerbation of existing conditions and diseases, accelerated aging, and of course, overall health deterioration. That is 100% what's going on amongst our jabbed community, and there is no point in trying to argue any other way. There is so much data now coming out from countries all over the world showing just what is going on. This is an interesting example. The world's deadliest pandemics. Now, of course, the Black Death, if you have a bit of a look across there, it killed 51% of the population. They estimate 200 million people. The world only had about a half or a little under 40 billion people in it at the time, or sorry, 400 million people in it at the time. And that's why it was such a high death rate. Of course, the plague of Justinian. How many people have ever heard of the plague of Justinian? The population had grown somewhat by then. It had taken the better part of 500 years to recover from the Black Death. Smallpox came into being. That killed 12% of the population at about 56 million people. Then the Antonine Plague, never even heard of that one. The Spanish flu, once again, also contrived by the Americans, just between you and the gatepost. The third plague, HIV and AIDS. And then, of course, right down the bottom, the jabbity jib one, the dreaded sneeze. 0.03% or 2.7 million people. So what they're showing there is, in the big scheme of things, this pandemic hasn't killed very, very many people at all. But early days yet. We have a kill box of 3 to 5 years for those folks who have had the jab. So, and there's not too much you can do about it for the aforementioned reasons. Any one of those things popping up on that list there, not going to help. So it's very easy to see that while the hype around the jab continues, the real death rate, and I've got to say, this is an imagined death rate as well. They are changing how deaths can be reported. Now, I believe in America, and it will change here in Australia too, if it hasn't done so already. Any death by pneumonia or bronchial infection will go into a category where it will be labelled as a death under the dreaded cough. So they're going to try and hide the kill shots, if you like, in the death rates buried under flus, colds, and pneumonia. That's where they're going to bury this death rate. Now, speaking of buried flus, flu cases mysteriously disappeared. And that's exactly what happened. Do you remember? We never had a flu case in the whole couple of years where all of this was the dreaded thing that was going to kill us. Not one flu case. All disappeared off the face of the earth. Now, of course, it's coming back again. But, of course, if you are going to go and get a flu jab these days, it will be infested with mRNA. And you will be getting the dose you don't want by getting the flu dose, so to speak. Terribly distressing if you're not aware of it. I'll tell you another thing that's pretty distressing. I think on the 7th of June, the Ukrainians launched their counterstrike. I beg your pardon. They launched their counterstrike against Russia. Now, the Ukrainians have had a pretty bad few days. They won't tell you that. The mainstream media won't tell you that. In fact, the mainstream media will tell you the opposite. But this is the result of a counteroffensive that the Ukrainians tried on against a Russian defensive line in the last 48 hours or so. But that's the result. And I was listening to a Russian commander's report today. In the last 3 days, the Ukrainians have lost about 150 tanks, about 350 armored personnel carrier, about 1,000 people, and quite a few other, smaller mechanized divisions gone because they've been trying to push back against the Russians. The Russians have also now gone to full mobilization, and that means that they are calling up all their reserves, including the old tanks that they have, the old T-51s, I think, or T-54s. Now, these tanks, while they might be old and might be vulnerable to modern-day weaponry, there is only so much modern-day weaponry that the Ukraine has access to. And most of the people driving that weaponry haven't had the training required to drive it correctly. So the odds of them actually hitting anything they're aiming at isn't high. Of course, the media are on their side, and they will forever be talking up how well the Ukrainians are doing. But the fact is, the Ukrainian military, in many cases, are now rebelling against Zelensky. They are sick to death of the small group of politicians who are making a fortune out of this, while elderly Ukrainians are starving to death because they can't get supply lines in to feed the people. And much less, the Ukrainians aren't even trying to feed their own people. The Russians are trying to get in there and feed them. And that is why the Russians want those 3 areas back so badly. Those areas have been predominantly Russian forever. And people in there speak Russian. They don't speak Ukrainian. They speak Russian. They are being persecuted by the Ukrainians. This is why the Russians are going in and doing what they're doing, in part. The other part, of course, is that they're trying to kill off the Nazi head of the beast, the Khazarian mafia. Now, you can choose to believe that, or you can choose not to believe that. I don't really mind what you believe. I think the truth will be borne out in coming days. Speaking of the truth being borne out, are you aware that pretty much Canada, east and west, is on fire at the moment? There was an amazing video put out the other day that basically showed southeast Quebec, all of southeast Quebec, catching fire at the same time. Fires spread across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometres, all starting at pretty much the exact same instant, captured on satellite imagery. There was something else that was captured by satellite imagery, though this was captured in California. We have seen it used in the California bushfires of a couple of years ago. We have seen it used in Canada. And there is a large school of belief that it was used here in Australia in the terrible fires of a couple of years ago through New South Wales. We have seen evidence of houses that have been cut in half the house gone, the other half perfectly fine, as if sliced by a very hot knife. And everything on the other side of that beam is burnt to a crisp, bursts into flames. Great way of starting bushfires. We've also seen vision of helicopters that are dropping flame from flame buckets, they're called. Now, it's hard to tell whether or not that vision has been shot recently. It's hard to tell whether or not that vision isn't actually some sort of countermeasure, burning fire breaks in inaccessible areas, that kind of thing. That could be possible. So don't go and get too jumped up and excited if you are seeing those sorts of bits of vision around where you're seeing a helicopter dropping flame out of a box that's on fire underneath it. That is a way that I know both the Americans and the Canadians use to start off fire cleaning, if you like, exercises, backburning, we call it, in their deeply wooded areas. The problem is a lot of the areas that are catching fire instantaneously across Canada are populated. There's a lot of people living in those mountains and living in those forests. They've got their hunting lodges or their homes they've built out there, people who are living off grid. There is a very large school of thought that say the Canadians are trying to drive those people back into town and back into 15-minute cities, so that will come online sooner rather than later. So now they're trying to force those people out of the bush and back into centralized areas where they can exert more control over them. When I say they, I mean Trudeau and co, because clearly that bastard is just as mad as a basket full of cut snakes. Unbelievable. Now, there was one other thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight, because CGI is something that we are all going to have to get a little bit better at recognizing, or at least not believing everything that we see on a screen. Now, I'm going to play you a video that may look a bit familiar to you, because I did play the original to you, I don't know, a few months ago now. It was a video of a robot doing some assault training and being assaulted in the process. There has been a new release on that video, which gives you a graphic understanding of exactly what you're looking at and how easy it is to fool us all. So have a look at this. So there you have it. I mean, it is pretty brilliant CGI, but very difficult to tell if you don't know what you're looking for. The only thing in that ever gave it away to me were shadows, particularly of the fully CGI created dog. That was probably the biggest giveaway for me on my first look at it some time ago. There were others as you go back through it, of course, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting that they're trying to put out this sort of stuff and tell us that it's real, because as we know, they actually have much better CGI available than that sort of stuff, and they probably do have some fairly well, I know for sure that they have exoskeletons that will allow a man or woman to lift the better part of a ton. These are suits that they wear, that they step into and essentially offer a hydraulic assistance. These things are also now available, I believe, commercially for jobs that require heavy lifting and all that sort of stuff. They've got legs that you get into and wear, and bionic arms, if you like, that you use to carry stuff around with. So all of that stuff is happening. And whether or not there is AI control of that sort of stuff, no. There's still got to be a human inside of it. But I have no doubt the AI is getting much better and frighteningly better at that, I think, is the best way of describing what's going on there. Now, I just want to have a little bit of a look at the website and thank everybody who's put in a limerick so far. There have been some very, very credible efforts being put in, I have to say. And congratulations to everybody who has had a go. It's not too hard to write a limerick. And if you are a Voice of Freedom member, we would love you to get in and have a go. If you would like to become a member, it's very easy. Go to vofhq.com and check out the membership button and join up there. You can do it from as little as $1.25 a week, and it all goes to help fund us on the road to come around to your place and try and get your voice out there to be heard. Now, like I say, we've had a lot of entries already, so thank you to those folks who are putting in the time and effort. Really do appreciate it. And it's not for nothing. There is the chance to win a magnificent 10-ounce silver bar, and I hope to have a conversation with Paul next week about whether or not we can go out and see that bar being poured. But that could come your way simply by getting involved in the competition. Write a limerick. You can use Voice of Freedom or Ainslie or Freedom Financial Solutions. If you can get all three into one, I think that would be a magnificent effort on your behalf, but I don't expect that. If you want to do three individual ones, one for each of them, feel free. We will give away the 10-ounce bar of solid silver, thanks to Ainslie Bullion, to the best overall limerick. That'll be judged by, I guess, all of us. And then the Voice of Freedom one will be judged by Vince predominantly. Ainslie will be judged by Paul. And, of course, Freedom Financial Solutions, the lovely Catherine Smith, will be handing out her winner there. And, of course, Freedom Financial Solutions are providing the runners-up prizes of a 1-ounce silver coin each. Nothing to be sneezed at, particularly if you don't have to pay for them. That's a bloody great idea. All right, folks, I haven't got too much more to share with you at the moment. There is some interesting stuff coming out. I believe we will hear a lot of news overnight, obviously with Donald Trump's latest in legal issue. Tuesday, Wednesday morning our time, he is due to front, or it'll be Wednesday night, I think, our time. He will be due to front a federal court in Miami over his latest indictment, 7 charges relating to boxes that he stored at Mar-a-Lago. It's sad that the fool of an Attorney General Garland is so dead set, so viciously dead set and myopic on Trump with his bias. Now, I was struggling to find out or figure out exactly why this bloke, Merrick Garland, hated Trump so much until it became obvious in a Senate hearing that I was watching the other day that he was a star of. And it was discussed at great length his abject hatred for Trump because he was denied a seat on the Supreme Court. Now, the Republicans didn't want and never voted for Merrick Garland to be raised to the High Court. And he has held that grudge ever since. That's why we see so much going on against Donald Trump from Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States of America, and a man who, if he hasn't already swung from the end of a rope or been sitting at the wrong end of a firing squad, he will be in the not too distant future. The FBI is falling apart in front of America's eyes. The level of corruption is so deep. It starts at the very top with Christopher Wray, and has filtered its way down through every senior level and into the assistant investigator roles, or the SACs of every FBI bureau in every part of the world. Some of these people have been drawn up into Congress to answer questions in front of some of these oversight committees, and they are blatantly refusing to answer questions. Just, we do this because that's the way we do things. We don't care if it breaks the Constitution. That's not what we do. Whistleblowers are saying the FBI has a culture of saying you swore an oath to the FBI, not to the Constitution. So you look after the FBI will look after you. If you want to go and look after the Constitution, you're in the wrong job. That is some very dangerous talk being given by highly senior members of the FBI from the last few years. There is a very incriminating interview that is done by McNabb, former director or deputy director of the FBI under Comey, where he ostensibly tries to lie his way out and lie Comey's way out of their involvement in the Pfizer applications and the absolute deceit that went on there. He's trying to breathe some life back into the Steele dossier, and I'm happy for him to keep bringing that Steele dossier up, because Australia is instrumental in that story. One Alexander Downer, and we haven't heard anywhere near the tip of the iceberg of that story yet, and Alexander Downer's involvement. I have tried to push through channels to see whether or not Malcolm Roberts or Senator Rennick would be interested in taking those questions to the Australian Federal Police in an estimates committee meeting, asking questions of the bloke that heads the AFP and ASIO, just what sort of a relationship the Five Eyes agreement makes us beholden to. And in fact, our Australian AFP head is head of the Five Eyes group. They probably say that the bloke in America is head of the Five Eyes group to Americans too, and the bloke in New Zealand's probably the head of it for that. Yeah, anyway, you get the idea. Everybody gets a chair, everybody gets a prize, nobody gets to do anything, and everybody gets to blame everybody else for everything. That's what's happening. There is a huge cover-up. The AFP is rotten to the bloody core, and there is great evidence of that coming out at the moment with some of the shit that's coming out around this whole Brittany Higgins thing from a little while back, the supposed rape case that was thrown out of court and now will not be retried, not because they believe that the gentleman concerned, Bruce Lemon, is innocent, but because it might hurt Brittany's mental health. She got a huge payout. We don't know exactly what that figure is. Rumoured she asked for $3 million. Apparently she didn't get that much. We're going to find out, though, because that payment has now been put forward to an administrative committee that the government will now investigate how much money that went out to her and who ordered it paid. There is also some very incriminating details coming out. Channel 10 are mortified by some of the things Lisa Wilkinson has been caught on camera saying, and clearly she has a bit of distaste for a number of our politicians, but a number of our black politicians. And as Lisa pointed out in one of the snippets that was released, leaked, if you like, not released, leaked to mainstream media today, she has a black cleaner. Apparently that means something. So, yeah, I can't wait to see the demise of Lisa Wilkinson. That will be one of our next main media scalps. Koshy left today. I think there were tears. I don't know if they were of happiness or he just knows what's coming. But yeah, Koshy's gone. They've put the human windscreen wiper in Matt Shervington, and Natalie Barr can't wipe the smile off her face. So good luck to all of them. I think it'll be a rather interesting time for Sunrise in the near future if Channel 9 is ever going to be able to come back from the absolute flogging that they are getting in the television ratings, breakfast ratings. Then this might be the opportunity. Although I actually think Matt Shervington's quite strong with all of this. He's pretty good with sport particularly, and he's a nice enough bloke. Pretty switched on to the finance game too. Recently sold one of the houses that he and his partner bought for $10 and a bit million. They live in a $12.2 million home, I say, over on the North Shore. He's invested well. He's done pretty good with his dollars, so good luck to him. Pardon me. Let me just have a bit of a look, see if I've missed anything here. I've probably missed a whole heap. Mr. Roberts is coming to Bribie on the 17th. Might have to make a trip to Bribie, and well, he's not returning my phone calls or my email, so maybe I'll see if he'll talk to me in person. Yeah, Real Rukshan has done some good videos about all that, Linda. You're absolutely right. In fact, Rukshan's doing some great work at the moment. Good on him. He's really doing some great work. Yeah, Senator Rennick spoke last night in Noosa. I heard he was going up there. I've actually had some people contact him on my behalf as well. He may or may not come on and talk to us. He doesn't know who I am, or he doesn't know anything about the show. Politicians are notoriously nervous about things like that too. So he may or may not, but I wouldn't expect him to come on and tell us anything new. I more particularly want him to come on the show to give us an undertaking that he will start asking questions of the AFP. That equally could be another reason why he doesn't want to come on the show. Uma was the bag lady for the Clintons. Yep, carried the money from Australia to the deep state. You're right. I think she also carried body bags around for some of the extracurricular activities that she and Hillary got into over time. Yep, Chris has the right idea here. We're all answering questions of people. Oh, well, if the white hats are doing it, why are they making us suffer? Why are they making this go on so long? It's because there are so many people who aren't awake, and if they just pulled the pin on it all, we would have civil wars in different parts of the world, not least of which America, and that would have a great deal of impact on what happens in the rest of the world. There are a lot of preppers. There are a lot of people with a lot of weapons in America. It's always been said you cannot invade America. You cannot get on the ground and invade America in a kinetic war, because there is an American behind every blade of grass, not with one gun, but with 20 guns. So you'll never be able to invade America in a kinetic war. What have they done? They've invaded America surreptitiously by opening the southern borders. And 85,000 children a day are going missing. I saw a horrifying report today from an American team who went onto the Mexican side of the border and found a child camp. And by a child camp, I mean basically a couple of lean-tos put together with sagebrush and a couple of bits of wood, a few towels hung over the entrance, not even a tarp. The area littered with baby bottles, diapers, menstrual cups for little girls or for young girls, all sorts of paraphernalia, but only children's paraphernalia. Little girls' pants, little girls' shoes, clothes, all for little people, little children, boys and girls. It was just horrifying to watch. Bags of formula, baby formula. All right. There were no adult things around here, which meant that it was a camp. They were holding the kids there, keeping them there until they were ready to cross them into the United States. And why are they crossing them into the United States? Because it's from there they are trafficked all over America. When an illegal comes across the border in most parts at the moment, they are taken to a processing center. They aren't quite sung kumbaya to. but they are processed through that centre and immediately put on buses or planes, and they are sent from the border regions where they crossed to anywhere in America that is a red state. And they are doing what Gillard, the red-headed clown, did here years ago on Crud. They are bribing these non-citizens with the ability to vote. And, of course, letting them know that the only reason they're in America and getting all this help and getting a house and getting money and getting these opportunities is because of Joe Biden. So you have to vote for Biden. And they readily agree because they understand it's a great opportunity they've been given. Well, they think it is. So that's how they beef up the blue vote in the red states, if you like. And the children, well, they're just collateral damage. You know, children can't vote, but they can be useful for so many other things in the world of these evil bastards. I can't wait until it's over, just like you. And I get the feeling in the water that it's sooner rather than later. This indictment of Trump, depending on, pardon me, what they do with it, Wednesday might just be a hearing. If they were to lock him up in some way, shape, or form, all sorts of trouble. But there is more than that, just locking Donald Trump up. What this has done is created a precedent. So now, should Donald Trump get re-elected in 2024, now that this precedent has been created by Biden, it allows Trump and his team to go back through every American presidency, particularly of the ones who are still living, and seeing exactly what they did wrong. Now, Bill Clinton got caught with not just documents he shouldn't have had. He stole half the interior of the White House, right? Like, stole George Washington's desk or you know, some of that scale of artifact. When they left the White House, Hillary Clinton cleaned it out. They had to go, the FBI and the Secret Service had to go to their big house up in New York, on the bay there, I can't say, Chapasky Bay, somewhere like that, and knock on the door and ask them to return the furniture. The Clintons thought they were going to get away with stealing the White House furniture. Take anything that wasn't nailed down. Back in those days, too, of course, if you were found to have committed adultery, that basically meant you could never be elected, and the government would never appoint you to any judge position or any of those high government appointed positions because you committed adultery. Well, all that changed after Bill Clinton because he had to lie his ass off about that. Remember Jennifer Flowers? Well, all that gets reopened. Anything to do with George W. Bush gets opened. And the beautiful bit is Obama. They get to crack open all of the documents that he took, and he's been discovered with. So the evidence is already there, but no charges were ever laid against Obama. George W. has a whole heap of documents as well, but nobody's ever charged him. Biden has over 1,800 documents that he shouldn't have, that he has had since he was vice president. Some of those documents are just floating around the floor of his garage at home in Delaware where he keeps his Corvette. Biden hasn't been charged with any document irregularities. So the real kicker for this is, of course, Trump doesn't have any secret documents that he's not meant to have. You see, as the president, he has the power to declassify documents as and when he sees fit. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that he did that after the fact, but the fact is he could have done that if he wanted to. So, yeah, there's going to be an interesting game played out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. That's also going to fall into line nicely with what's happening in the Ukraine, with Russia. And I think there is going to be a lot more blown up about this whole Brittany Higgins thing. Keep an eye on the government fallout there. That Katie Gallagher, she's got some questions to answer for. And who is David Shiraz? That is my question. Have you had a listen to some of the audio that's been released where he is definitely taking the lead on turning this, what on the face of it is a horrifying situation of a young girl, allegedly being raped in Parliament, or in the House of Parliament, but he's weaponized that, politically weaponized that, and is managing that, trying very hard to manage that from behind the scenes. And Brittany sounds quite complicit in that management. She doesn't sound terribly traumatized. She's more worried about control. She's more worried about hurting the Liberal Party. And of course, they kicked a goal with that, even though nobody had been found guilty. There hadn't even been a court case. Scott Morrison is out there apologising to her on behalf of a grateful nation, or a horrified nation, as the case was. Now, it was just, there was so many bad things that went on with that. It's going to get deeper, 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 and deeper. Albanese is potentially involved because they refer to him as a friend. Now, you might remember a few weeks ago, you probably won't follow 2Day FM in Sydney. There was an interesting little story came out about Erin Molan and Dave Hughes and Ed Cavalier, who do breakfast down there on the Sydney 2Day FM network. It was about getting access to Albo for something, and they had been grooming him as a friend of the show for years. So she, being Erin Molan, and Albo had developed quite a relationship, apparently. All which got destroyed over a headline that she wasn't even responsible for in some magazine article she wrote. But the fact remains that she said, we cultivated Albo as a friend. We did everything we could. We scratched his back. He would scratch out. So he would scratch our back when we needed him to. And that means that should he have actually fallen into the top job, which he wound up doing, they would have access to him. That's how it works. Build up those relationships. And, he's a friend of the show. So then you can pick up the phone and have a friendly conversation. Ask your friend a favour. Kyle Sandilands, he's been friends with most prime ministers over the days and, over the last few years anyway. I've seen him turn up at Kirribilli for events there hosted by prime ministers of all flavours, I think. Radio people, they're not fussy. They'll be happy to hang out with any celebrity, and to call them friend just gives them a bit of power to say, oh, hang on, I'll just ring Albo and see what he says. Now, in the great memory of you and I, can you remember a radio person outside of maybe, some steeped in history, very highly regarded ABC journalist, probably not a commercial journalist, but an ABC journalist, who was able to pick up the phone and call the Prime Minister? And would you ever think that the person on the end of the radio microphone who has the Prime Minister's phone number is also the same bloke that says if he gets his breakfast show to a 20 share, he will masturbate live on air? That's Kyle's promise to you, Sydney. Get him a 20 share. He'll jerk off on the air live for you. I must be just getting too old. I saw a picture the other day of Kyle and his staff. Kyle's double the age of most of his staff. And most of those staff are very young girls, and they've got big stars in their eyes. But if you have young children around at the moment, you just might want to block their ears for a second, because I'm going to tell you what the staff were chanting out while Kyle was explaining to his audience the other day how he had not half a chubby, but he had a full-on hard-on over their result in the survey, latest survey, which came out, where they killed it. They got number one breakfast show in Sydney yet again. Ben Fordham came in a lowly second. But as far as anybody else is aware in Sydney in the mornings, there is nobody else to listen to except for Kyle and Jackie O. They replay that show across the network again later in the night, or they cut a highlight show package together that goes an hour and a half sometimes. And then they run that back to back with the other star they have on the network out of Melbourne, and he puts a highlight package or show together for the early part of the evening on the ARN network. But Kyle, while saying he had a full hard-on over the results and indicating that, you know, he would masturbate if he ever got a 20 share, the staff broke out into a chant, and he has quite a staff. There's quite a few of them. All broke out into the chant, show us your cock. So this young staff are screaming that out while Kyle's on the air telling us all that if he gets a 20 share, he's going to jerk off on air live for Jackie, who'll no doubt sit there and watch it or I don't know, pretend to watch it. I don't know. I actually thought Jackie had a bit more class than that. But anyway, radio ain't what it used to be, kids. Ain't what it used to be. But it seems to be what's rating at the moment. God help us. And if that's the best we can do, then I'm pretty glad I'm not playing around in breakfast radio anymore, because I couldn't compete with that. I don't think anybody... I can't think anywhere in my history anybody's ever said to me, gee, Carl, I'd like to see you jerk off. A lot of people have called me a jerk. Plenty of people have called me a wanker. But I think they were just guessing. They might have just been dickheads on the road passing me by.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!